Lyra was only 17 then. She ran in despair, clutching her youngest sister. But as they reached the edge of the forest, a colossal column of fire, like the hand of a demon, fell, blocking their path. Her sister, in her arms, coughed violently, her eyes wide, then fell silent. Lyra screamed, but was helpless. She collapsed amidst the ashes, the sole survivor of a night of annihilation. Lyra swallowed hard, her steel-cold grey eyes now faintly trembling. She spoke slowly, each word like an arrow pinning her to the ground. The one behind it all is Vaynar. The one the world hails as the warden of the Ember Order, the keeper of the fire of order. Lyra let out a dry, hacking laugh like ash. The order he built is merely a facade for blood and fire. Vaynar is unlike ordinary fire-marked people. He has found a way to bend the ember mark to his will. The fire in his hands is not just a weapon. It is a chain. It is a tool of domination. Irene remained silent. The wind swept by, carrying the scent of smoke and dust, causing her hair to flutter gently. Her hand clenched until her knuckles turned white, the violet flame softly trembling in her palm like a creature holding its breath, waiting for a command. She didn't take her eyes off Lyra. In those eyes, light and darkness intersected, as if just one more word would change the color of the world. Irene's heart pounded erratically, each beat so strong she could hear the blood thrumming in her ears. Every breath was heavy, like fire about to ignite, both restrained and trembling with fear of herself. Lyra's words continued to fall, deep and clear, like blows against metal about to explode. Irene heard it all, every word, every breath, and each word was like a small ray of light piercing the darkness within her. She wanted to reply, but her throat was choked. Only her unwavering gaze remained, grateful, pained, and fearful of what she was about to do. In the palm of her hand, the fire trembled again, this time not from anger, but from a resolution taking shape. Lyra continued, her voice gradually sinking like a curse. My family isn't the only one. He has burned down countless domains, countless smaller bloodlines, just to expand his power. But no one dares call him by his true name. They only whisper in the shadows, calling him the Black Flame of the North. Lyra's gaze met Irene's, deep and heavy as if placing an invisible burden on her shoulders. If you want to go all the way, you must be prepared to face him. Because once you've heard that name, no one can stay out of the conflict. The road stretched long. It was not just a path of stone and dust, but a trial for two souls that had been scorched. Irene and Lyra wandered together through different lands. From the arid plains with their skin-chapping winds to the bustling marketplaces where oil lamps cast light on the weary faces of exiles. They learned to survive on the smallest things. A piece of dry bread traded for a hunter's arrow, a resting spot thanks to the small fires Irene kindled to chase away the darkness. During their journeys at night, they met other travelers. A minstrel spoke of the one hailed as the warden of the Ember Order, who guarded the secrets of the ancient fire. An old widow sat before a bed of ash, silently cursing Vaynar for ordering her village burned to make an example. A group of deserters, wine in hand, whispered that Vaynar's fire was not just a fighting force. It was a form of bound magic, a cruel tether to the soul. Each piece they picked up on the road gradually formed a blurry but threatening picture. Lyra kept her gaze sharp, resolute as a taut bowstring. To her, Vaynar was the destroyer of her family, an enemy who must fall. But for Irene, a different suspicion arose in her heart. If Kaelin truly fell due to a conspiracy, could Vaynar be the hand behind it? Whenever the memory returned, Irene recalled her brother's eyes that day. Eyes that hadn't quite registered panic, only a fleeting moment of something like recognition. Recognition of what? Irene tormented herself endlessly. By day, she trained with Lyra, controlling the fire into long streaks of light, forming a protective circle around their camp. By night, when everything was quiet, Irene sat alone, her hand open, the charcoal violet flame trembling. Doubt gnawed, consuming her sleep. Lyra noticed this. One evening, as Irene quietly extinguished the flame in her hand, Lyra spoke. What are you looking for in that fire? Irene flinched slightly, then sighed. The truth. The truth is not always found in the ashes, Lyra replied, her eyes fixed on the starry sky. But if you want to find it, I will help. Because I need the truth too, for myself. Two people, two different sorrows. But from that moment, they became true companions. Not just to survive, but to travel to the very depths of the darkness where Lord Vaynar sat waiting. Day by day, Irene began to piece together what she had heard, the few remaining traces. Kaelin's death was not merely an accident. It bore the mark of a hand that knew how to manipulate the flame, a power only someone like Vaynar could possess. And Irene understood. Her journey was not just for vindication. It was to overturn the fire that had consumed her life and all the other lost souls. Irene and Lyra's journey did not stop with the dusty winds of far roads. Every region they passed through bore Vaynar's scars, burned villages, displaced people with no homes left, layers upon layers of resentful glances. Gradually, Irene and Lyra were no longer traveling alone. They gathered people who had once been victims of Vaynar's hand. A blacksmith who had lost his entire family, keeping only his calloused hands and an iron hammer. A young woman whose voice was like silk but who had permanently lost her village, her home, and nearly her voice too. Deserters, who still bore the burn scars on their skin from the fire they once served. With every person who joined, Irene felt the burden in her chest grow heavier. They followed her. They believed in that strange violet fire, a fire unlike that of the tyrants they had known. But then, that very belief was tested. In an ambush, cornered by their enemies, Irene exploded. The fury of the past, the pain for her brother, the hatred for Vaynar, it all converged into a devastating blaze. It no longer distinguished between friend and foe. The fire spread, consuming the air, turning the very sky and earth into a crimson sea. Screams rang out. Panic-stricken faces. And in that moment, Irene realized, she was pushing her comrades into the very abyss that Vaynar had created. She collapsed, her heart constricted. No! I didn't mean to. In the midst of the chaos, within the inferno, Irene suddenly saw a figure emerge. Kaelin's eyes, clear, gentle, as they were when he used to shelter her. He didn't blame her. He didn't accuse. He just smiled softly. Irene. Fire is not a chain. It is a guiding light. The voice echoed, whether from reality or from the depths of her soul. But it cut through the darkness within her. The violet flame flared up once more, but this time it did not burn. It drew back, enveloping her comrades, forming a protective shield, chasing away the lingering smoke. When the battle was over, Irene knelt, tears streaming down her face. Something in her heart had changed. From that moment, Irene no longer saw fire only as a tool for revenge. She began to use it for salvation, mending wounds, warming trembling bodies, lighting the path in the dark night. People began to call her name. Whispered stories started to spread from the lands where they stopped. Two wandering girls, Irene with the strange violet flame, and Lyra with an arrow that never missed its mark. One who burned away the darkness, one who shot through the lies. And in every hushed tale, the violet fire no longer signified destruction. It became hope. A promise that even souls consumed by the deep night could find the light for the future. Once, they stopped at a poor riverside town named Grethollow. It had been a bustling trade center, but after Vaynar's purge, nothing remained but scorched rooftops and tattered residents. That night, Irene walked along the rickety shelters, the violet fire dancing in her hand, no longer aggressively bursting, but subdued like the light of an oil lamp. A little girl coughed violently from the smoke and dust, her chest heaving. Her mother knelt and begged Lyra for help, but Lyra only shook her head. Hands skilled with a bow could not soothe the pain. Irene walked over, kneeling to the child's eye level. "You'll be all right." She placed her warm hand on the child's chest, allowing the violet flame to seep into every breath. The fire burned away, the smoke lodged deep in the lungs, but did not scorch even a strand of hair. The girl gradually breathed steadily, her eyelids closing in peaceful sleep. The mother burst into tears, tightly gripping Irene's hand. Elsewhere, an old blacksmith had lost his entire workshop to Vaynar's fire, his hands trembling too much to hold a hammer. Irene sat beside him for hours, using the violet flame to reheat a rusty piece of steel, then handed him the hammer. The fire that once destroyed can now return your strength, old man. When the hammer struck the forge, the sound of metal echoed through the night. In the blacksmith's clouded eyes, the first spark of hope in years gleamed. These small acts, seemingly ordinary, changed the way everyone looked at Irene, and the way Lyra looked at her. Lyra had quietly observed her ever since the night Irene nearly burned everything down. Lyra was a person with a searing pain in her heart, living only for revenge. But seeing Irene sitting beside a child, her hand trembling yet patiently using fire to heal, Lyra realized, perhaps their existence was not solely for vengeance. One night, as they both sat by the campfire, the wind carrying the ashes away, Lyra spoke in a low voice. Irene, do you know? Before, I thought all fire was cursed. But you are different. You make me think. Perhaps fire can save someone too. Irene looked up, her eyes reflecting the charcoal violet light. She smiled, weary but genuine. I'm just trying to believe that myself. From that day on, they were no longer just allies. They were friends. Sisters. Two lost souls relying on each other to keep going. But deep within Irene, the fire never stopped asking, what did Kaelin die for? She didn't say much, but Lyra knew. Every time Vaynar was mentioned, Irene's eyes always trembled like ashes in the wind. And Lyra had never forgotten the night the Duskfall family was swallowed by the sea of fire. One day, both would have to face Vaynar. Not just for revenge. Not just for the past. But for the countless people living in fear, waiting for a different fire, a guiding fire. One late afternoon, Irene and Lyra were passing through a sparse forest when they heard a raw cry for help echoing from a rocky hollow. An old woman with silver hair and tattered clothes was being dragged away by two mercenaries. Lyra acted swiftly. An arrow tore through the wind, sinking into one man's leg. Irene swept her hand, and the violet fire burst into a circle of light, causing the remaining soldiers to flee in panic. They approached, helping the old woman into the woods. She was panting, her eyes dim but holding a familiar spark, as if she had seen Irene long ago. The fire! That fire! I finally see it again. Irene froze. Did you know me? The old woman, trembling, gripped Irene's hand, her voice hoarse from age and years of fleeing. I once served under Lord Vaynar. I know him well. What he always sought was the very flame in your bloodline. The flame, unlike any other in Ashveil. Irene's chest tightened. Lyra frowned, alert. Explain yourself. The old woman sighed, fear etched clearly in her eyes. The Ashveil family never valued you. They restrained you, they ridiculed you, they prevented that power from flourishing. But Vaynar was different. He understood that there was only one way to force that dormant fire to erupt, to take away the most precious thing from its owner. Her voice trembled, but every word was like a sharp knife plunging into Irene's heart, he calculated. He knew. Only by pushing you to the brink, forcing your heart to explode in pain, would that flame transform into an uncontrollable power. And then, he would have his chance to seize it. Irene went numb. Her throat constricted. Only one name echoed in her ears. Kaelin. She whispered, her voice husky like a dying fire. My brother. Kaelin. Was it because of me? Tears threatened to spill. The flame in her hand flared fiercely, then died down, leaving behind scattered ashes. Lyra placed a hand on Irene's shoulder, but she shrugged it off, stepping back. She found it hard to breathe, as if the whole world was dumping its guilt onto her chest. If Kaelin died just to force the fire in me to awaken, didn't I essentially kill him myself? Lyra tightly clenched her fist. She understood Irene was sinking into the abyss she herself had experienced, the guilt of surviving while loved ones fell. No, Lyra said firmly. The fault is not yours. The only one to blame is Vaynar. But Irene didn't answer. In her red-flecked eyes, The image of Kaelin falling in the sea of fire kept repeating, now shrouded by the darkness named Vanar. In Irene's heart, a terrifying truth first flickered. She was the root cause of Kaelin's death. And now, she didn't know if she had the strength to confront that. Irene collapsed to the ground, her hands braced on the hard earth, her fingers frantically scraping deep grooves in the layer of rotten leaves. Her body felt drained of all strength, each breath intermittent like a failing fire. The violet flame within her flared and died down repeatedly, like a heart struggling between life and death. Kaelin's image returned. His warm smile, the hand that used to rest on her shoulder, and the moment he vanished in the fierce blaze. Kaelin, was it for me? A choking sob escaped, but Irene no longer wailed. The pain was too immense for tears to flow, leaving only a wrenching silence. Lyra stood nearby, her eyes filled with worry. She had prepared herself for Irene to collapse, to be swallowed by hatred, just as she had lost everything herself. But what surprised Lyra was, Irene didn't crumble forever in the darkness. A moment later, Irene slowly looked up. Her red eyes gleamed, no longer trembling, but holding a strange, determined light. She whispered, her voice husky but strong. If his death was to force the fire in me to awaken, then I won't let it become a mere game for him. I won't let him die in vain. She tightly gripped her hand, and the violet flame flared up, but this time it was no longer erratic. It burned straight and clean, like a column of fire lighting up the night. I will live. I will live better. For him. For all who believed in me. And for myself too. She stood up, ash falling from her shoulders, as if the darkness had finally decided to leave her body. She took a deep breath, her chest filled with strength. In her eyes now, Kaelin was no longer just pain, but an eternal vow. Vanar will pay. But not just for revenge. I will make him understand. This fire cannot be stolen. It belongs to me, and I will use it to save what he has destroyed. Lyra was silent. At the corner of her lips, a slight twitch, not a clear smile, but recognition. She knew Irene had just crossed an abyss that few escape. That violet flame was now not just a sentence, but a banner. Irene had chosen to rise from her own ashes. The night over the plains still held streaks of ash, but a different light burned in Irene's heart. No longer the fire of loss but the fire of will. The words of the old woman in the forest still echoed within her. Vanar did not act alone. He used power, fear, and trickery to manipulate the fire of others. He knew how to detonate power with the pain he inflicted. Irene was no longer a person of rash actions. Her months of exile had taught her how to distill anger into a plan. She and Lyra began to construct a map. The names of the lost, the locations of tragedies, the traces of Vanar's henchmen, and the deceptive slogans he used to legitimize his crimes. They traveled from village to province, utilizing every kindness Irene had given to gather accounts and evidence. The blacksmith gave them a strangely marked sword, an insignia of Vanar's troops. A wandering singer provided a secret letter obtained from a city vault, revealing a money transfer to an elder in the Ember Order, a political and mystical organization that served as a facade for Vanar's manipulation, determining the fate of those lucky enough to possess the Embermark power. The old woman who had once served Vanar pointed out a series of sham order rituals Vanar used to recruit loyalists, and simultaneously, how he experimented to detonate the Embermark in the vulnerable. Each clue was a broken piece of a mirror. Irene pieced them together with patience and calculation. Lyra, with her experience and underworld connections, helped her reach witnesses still too terrified to speak. They didn't seek sensationalism. They collected every utterance, every seal, every scorched wooden slab with carvings. Irene understood that to overturn the leader, she couldn't rely solely on the screams of the villagers. She needed people with social leverage, those who had been in the system but were no longer controlled. They sought out a few figures who had publicly followed Vanar but now despised his atrocities, a deceived minor official in the Ember Court, the supreme sanctuary where the Ember Order held sway, an experienced elder who had prioritized politics over justice and now felt betrayed. By saving these people from fear with her healing fire, by presenting evidence that Vanar had manipulated them, Irene gradually gained at least 2 influential voices, enough to launch a public inquiry if they stood together. Lyra named their group with a slight smile. A ragtag formation, but one that knows how to stand together. Irene's plan wasn't to set traps like burning houses or ambushing single clues. She wanted to show the entire alliance and the public Vaynar's modus operandi. The sham rituals, the use of pain as a tool, the night contracts with the fire hunters. They staged a strategic series of exposures. First, revealing small pieces of evidence, allowing public opinion to grow, then releasing stronger documents. The money transfer letter, the carvings on the weaponry, the confession of old witnesses. Each revelation shook the local press. Each testimony cracked Vaynar's flame of power. When public outcry was sufficient, they began to approach those with the authority to prosecute. An official in the Ember Court who could initiate an investigation if presented with convincing proof. Lyra covertly protected the official from attacks, while Irene used her fire to recreate a scene, not to deceive, but to illustrate how Vaynar manipulated the flame, allowing observers to understand the nature of the manipulation. The sight of Irene standing in the marketplace, reconstructing a sham ritual with a pure flame, was a shock. People were both scared and mesmerized by the difference between her and those who abused the fire. It was the message: not everyone who bears the ember mark is evil. The crime lies with those who use the flame for ambition. Every step forward in the plan brought a complex feeling to Irene. The desire to drag Vaynar to hell surged powerfully. She wanted him to be consumed by the arrogant fire he had used to condemn others. But Kaelin, in her memory, was still the one softly whispering, "Fire is a guiding light." The truth formed a double-edged sword. If Irene acted only out of hatred, she risked becoming like Vaynar. If she acted based on justice and compassion, she would not only restore her brother's name but save many more people. Lyra was the voice of reality. She constantly reminded Irene that hatred could blur evidence, shattering the plan. But when the shadows of the past returned, when the soul of a crying mother recounted the scene of soldiers sent by Vaynar, Irene felt her heart warm with a different resolve. To make all those responsible pay, either by the community's law, or if justice was insufficient, by the righteous fire she chose to purge cruelty, not blind vengeance. "Eat something, Irene." Lyra walked up, holding some bread and a cup of warm milk. She reached out and took the food from Lyra's hand, offering a brief smile. "Thank you." "You know the Shattered Plains, don't you?" Lyra sat down, asking softly. Irene looked up, her gaze still lost in the papers scattered before her, the shaky, inked notes. "I've heard of it. It's where Vaynar perpetrated his largest massacre." "Why do you ask?" Lyra looked into the distance, where the moonlight shimmered over the field like water. "If we want definitive proof, we must go there. The Shattered Plains is not just a barren wasteland of ash. It holds what Vaynar didn't have time to erase." A shiver ran through Irene. That name, the Shattered Plains, was like a crack in the collective memory of the people. Once a vibrant small city, it was now only soot and charcoal. People avoided mentioning it, as if merely speaking the name could reignite the wrongful flames. "Perhaps there." Lyra lowered her voice. "We will find the final evidence to overturn him. Or a truth that even you are not ready to face." Irene clenched her hand. A slender violet flame flickered in the gap between her fingers, then immediately died out. She knew Lyra was serious. Every clue they pursued pulled Irene closer to an abyss, where Kaelin's death awaited. The Shattered Plains, the land that was once a city of fire, now remained only as fractured cliffs and scorched black earth. The wind blew through a colossal fissure, carrying the smell of sulfur, eerie as an echo of the past. Irene and Lyra set foot on the ground, silently observing the desolate expanse before them. "There's nothing left." Lyra gripped her bow tightly, her eyes wary. Irene stepped forward a few paces, her eyes scanning. She hoped to see lingering evidence, documents, weapons, unerased remnants. But all was broken stone, black ash, and silence. A silence that made her heart uneasy. Then, from the shadow of the rocks, torches flared. A tight circle formed, dozens of black-armored warriors appeared, red flames fiercely coiling around them. "It's a trap." Lyra gritted her teeth, an arrow drawn on her bowstring. A low, hoarse voice echoed across the broken plain. "I have been waiting for you, Irene Ashveil." From the darkness, Lord Vanar emerged. His long cloak billowed. His eyes glowed with an evil fire. With every step he took, the ground cracked as if burned from its core. Irene felt her heart seize. This was the man who had manipulated her entire life, the one who had driven Kaelin to his death. "Vanar!" Irene's voice erupted like thunder. "You killed my brother, only to turn me into your tool. You sowed fear, committed murder, and used pain to break people. All those lost souls, they are your crimes." He laughed, a dry, sharp sound like a knife. "True, because only pain could make your fire erupt. Kaelin was a necessary sacrifice. And you are the raw jewels I desire. The flame within you. I will seize it. You were born to serve me, Irene." "No!" Irene screamed, the violet fire exploding around her. But at that moment, a stream of black fire shot from Vanar's hand. In a fleeting instant, Lyra lunged forward. "Irene!" A gut-wrenching scream. The black fire arrow pierced her shoulder. Red blood sprayed out. Lyra collapsed, but a faint smile still played on her lips. Lyra had blocked the blow for Irene. Irene went numb. Her mind was blank. Her heart felt as if it would burst. The image of Kaelin falling was now repeated with Lyra. Pain, loss, and hatred merged into a tidal wave. The fire within her erupted, no longer violet, no longer black, but blazing like a shattered sun. Fire wrapped around her body. Her eyes burned fiercely, a majestic ribbon of flame bursting out like the wings of an immortal bird. "Phoenix Veil," Irene whispered, the fire singing in every cell of her flesh and blood. Vanar recoiled, his eyes shaken for the first time. "No, it can't be. That flame. It has surpassed the ember mark." Irene advanced, the fire blanketing the entire shattered plains. Her voice echoed, not just from her throat, but from her very will. "You used pain to break others. But fire is not meant to serve hatred. It is meant to illuminate, both for the lost souls and the living." Vanar roared, unleashing his full power of black fire to resist. But the vibrant purple storm from Irene engulfed his sea of fire completely. His screams vanished in the endless flame. His black cloak turned to dust. The name that once sowed fear disappeared in the conflagration. Irene gasped, her flame wings slowly fading, and she collapsed next to Lyra. Blood still oozed from the wound. Lyra's breath was fragile. "Don't, Lyra, not this ending." Irene trembled, placing her hand on her friend's chest. The fire blazed, this time not to destroy, but to heal. The Phoenix Veil poured streaks of light into Lyra's body, burning away the toxic blood, mending every broken vein. Lyra let out a soft cry, her eyes slowly opening. Irene burst into tears, holding her friend tightly in her arms. Many weeks later, on a small mound of earth, where wild yellow flowers bloomed, Lyra stood beside Irene. The wound had healed, leaving only a thin scar on her shoulder. "You did what no one dared to believe," Lyra said, her voice still husky but warm. "Vanar is gone. This whole land will slowly escape the darkness." Irene looked out at the horizon, the violet flame dancing in her palm. But this time, it was peaceful, gentle as a guiding lamp. "I'm not going back," she said softly. "Kaelin is gone, the past cannot be undone. But if the fire within me can save someone, I will continue. With you." Lyra smiled, her eyes serious yet warm. "Then we will go. Not for revenge, but for those who still haven't managed to stand up." The two figures, one fire, one arrow, walked away into the sunset. People in later generations would pass down the story of the two female warriors, one bearing the Phoenix Veil, violet fire that could save even lost souls, and an archer who traversed the darkness to protect that light. It was no longer just a legend. It was the truth. The fire did not die. It was reborn in those who dared to walk through suffering to find freedom.